in getting any depth on these stories, because what we see mostly now is like fireworks. You see the explosion, but you don't see what it takes to make it, and then what's left afterwards. Besides the smell of sulfur, what's left afterwards. So, yeah, it's interesting. We're in a very interesting point in our country's history.
Just to get the ball rolling,
Sure.
I was going to ask, abortion, reaction from the ruling, and you've said that you were against abortion, even in the case of rape, incest, or mother's love.
Well, you know what? We'll get you information on our heartbeat bill. And then with that, you can take a look at that and give you a little more depth of what it is we're trying to do, because that's one of the pieces I think that has a likelihood of going through the House. We're getting more people, because there's as you know, we're extreme on the right or the left. On the far right, it's under no circumstances at all can there be an abortion, and on the left, under any circumstance at all, up until even birth, there can be an abortion. So we think there's somewhere in the middle. Heartbeat would cover probably 2/3 of abortions that take place. I think, with the exception of for the mother's health, we have a pretty. That's one of the things we're very concerned with, and it's always about life. I just tell you, have any of you been to Washington for the March for Life? It's an incredible event. And I'm not talking about. It's reported that a couple hundred people showed up. Well, they miss it by about 495,000. There's usually about 500,000 people down there, but it is the most peaceful, prayerful, happy assembly in Washington. There's just nothing like it. And on the other side of that issue, it's angry and destroying public property and burning things down and threatening people's lives. It's like, wait a minute, I'm not sure I understand this. So I think on that piece alone, and most people don't understand, the Supreme Court ruling said, well, we're going to return to the states the responsibility that they should have on this. 50 states get a chance to weigh in. And I had lunch with Justice Scalia when I first got into office, and I thought it was interesting what he said. So we were talking. He said, "You're a big pro-life guy." I said, "Well, my wife's 1 of 9. I'm 1 of 5. My wife and I have 4 children right now. We lost 1 child between 1 and 2 because of an ectopic pregnancy. So I'm very much pro-life." He said, "Well, Mike, what's always bothered me, that 50 states would dodge their responsibility and turn it over to 9 former attorneys and hope that somehow they rule in their favor." I said, "I never looked at it that way." He goes, "That's what's happened on this." He said, "It should have stayed in the states. It never should have come to the Supreme Court." Well, and what we've seen that happened last week was the Supreme Court said, "You know what? Let's return it to the states. Let the states decide." And then it becomes a much more personal issue. I will say this. I think that for years, I've sat with people that would say, my personal preference would be pro-life, but the Supreme Court made that decision, and we're not going to challenge what the Supreme Court says. I just think that the pro-life people for 50 years thought they had a case that made sense and never deviated from it. Their message was always peaceful and prayerful and very serene. What happened last week, I think it was pretty much anticipated what the court was going to find. So I keep hearing, well, there's going to be demonstrations, there's going to be people very upset, they're going to burn things down, and they're going to break things, and there's going to be violence. I said, that doesn't make sense to me. It makes no sense. So that's where we are right now. We'll see what happens.
So just going back, you're touting the heartbeat bill.
Yes.
And that allows abortion under what circumstances?
Well, I think that all of us, anybody who's visited a doctor, what's the first thing a doctor does? They wear a stethoscope for a reason, not just because they play a part in some play. The first thing they do is they check your pulse or they check your heartbeat. And what we've said is once you detect a heartbeat, that child should not be aborted, with the exception of the mother's health. So now, I got to tell you, I don't know that that's what will finally go to the floor, because I think we'll have a lot of people weighing in on it. I think right now, what do we have? About 115, 120 co-sponsors on that. It will not go to the floor this year, you know that, right? Okay, a lot of people don't understand that. So what we're trying to do, Mike, is get to the next session, depending whether we're in the majority or not. If we're not in the majority, it will never get to the floor. It'll generate a lot of participation. But I'm really interested to see what the states do now. How do the states look at this? And individual states have the ability to develop their own view on this. But I really it's going to be interesting, because I look at this as a different dynamic that takes place here. I mean, we are appalled as a country anytime we see the loss of life someplace else and say, gosh, what's going on in Ukraine right now? This is horrible. They took a maternity hospital. The Russians blew up a maternity hospital. These were pregnant women, and these were children who were just born, and they killed them. And then on the other hand, they'll say, but in our country, we have a different view of that. So I'm not comparing the two of them together. I'm just comparing the thinking on it, because we all can agree that what's happened in Ukraine is absolutely horrible, and the loss of life is absolutely horrible. So what's the old saying? You can see the splinter in your neighbor's eye, but not the plank in your own. I just think there's a way of addressing these things. I would hope people would look at it that way. The other thing,
So
there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people. I understand that a pregnancy doesn't always happen when the mother would like it to happen, but there is an adoption option that is out there. So, and we've worked on that for many years too, to make sure that people know that there is an adoption option. I think the faith-based community is very good about saying, listen, if that's a child that came at the wrong time in your life for a lot of different reasons, we do have a home for that little girl or that little boy.
I think, at least locally, Senator Mastriano's version of his
Oh, yeah,
bill,
yeah.
I mean, he's said flatly, he even told us at a campaign event.
Yeah. I've read that. I've read
No,
what he
I
said.
mean, flatly no
Yeah,
exceptions,
yeah.
rape, mother's health, just if there's a heartbeat. I think after 6 weeks,
Yeah.
there's no abortion. I
Yeah.
mean, is that?
Well, I mean, that's his position. I understand that.
Well,
I think our position
I
is
mean,
based
is-
on what it is that we think
Is
may
that
not
the-
be ideal. It's not going to be. Listen, there's no piece of legislation that since I've been there that's perfect for everybody. We offer an opinion. We offer a view that we have a lot of agreement on, and I think what we all do in our lifetime. What it may not be exactly what I want, but does it get closer to the issue? And I think what we proposed is much closer to the issue.
I think, is that the right approach? If you have, I mean, it's going to come down to legalese potentially between different states.
It doesn't everything. Yeah, I'm not a
But-
lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. I've been the victim of a lot of lawyers, but I'm not a lawyer myself. So, yeah, listen, there's going to be people weighing in on it, but that's the beauty of who we are.
so as the bill now stands, the heartbeat bill.
Yeah.
If there's a heartbeat, that stops the abortion option,
With the exception if there's a mother's health.
with the exception of the mother's health.
yeah.
Okay.
That's where it stands today.
Sure.
If you understand. I mean, we think that is a compromise that addresses 2/3 of the abortions that are out there. But by the same token, does leave opportunities for people who say it's not as far to the right as I would like it to be, and people that says, well, it's much farther to the middle than I want it to be, but does it make sense? And I just would tell you, I don't know of anything that's more indicative of life than a heartbeat. It's the first thing that everybody checks, and whether it's in an accident that takes place, either a traffic accident or an industrial accident, the first thing they do is put the stethoscope to you or check your pulse. And I think if that's not an indication of life, and if people say, I don't really believe it's life, then the question is, well, what would you use to determine if it's life? And I think we've come up with something that's pretty easily understood. You don't have to have a medical degree to understand that.
I sent both of you the original release from 2021, and then our more updated one from, I think it was a couple weeks ago. But it better explains the provisions as far as the life of the mother and things like that as to what. Yeah.
Do you want to go on to other cases?
Well, yeah, this one got lost because of abortion, but I don't need to tell you guys, guns are a heritage in Western Pennsylvania.
Amen.
You ain't gonna take them from us. Okay, what was your opinion of the Supreme Court on that ruling?
Well, I think You hit it on the head. So there's 435 of us, right? And you go into different districts and you get different ideas about what should that stance be. The district that I represent right now, I'm very privileged and honored to represent it. This is where people really believe their Second Amendment rights are very strong and should be protected. But again, you have different opinions on these things. I just think that when you know how that legislation was enacted, and you said, well, what was the input from the other side? And they said, what are you talking about? So, well, kind of like we're sitting here right now. What if we had an interview, but you weren't allowed to interview me? You understand where we are right now. There's not one Republican at the table. They're not in the room. They're not in the building. And in too many cases, we haven't even been in the town. So when we talk about, and our friends on the left, and I have a lot of them, will say, I don't know why you really need to vote with us. And I said, well, but why are you saying that now? Because we're totally out of the consideration in any policy structure. So you want us to vote with you, but we're not allowed to structure any of the legislation. And quite honestly, you already have it passed when it comes out of your discussion. You don't go to the floor. Well, you control the rules committee. You control everything. You don't need one Republican vote to pass anything. And I think it's pretty apparent that's the way it's gone. So I think, again, it's easy to say, well, I wish we could work together. And it's like two people who don't want to be married go into a marriage counselor and then surprised and come out of it getting divorced. If you're not at the table. So if I say, you know what, Mike, I want your opinion, but you're not allowed to weigh in, and you say, well, I'm not. You don't want my opinion. I say, well, I don't really need your opinion, but I'm going to recognize that you're at least in the government. So I think it's been pretty hypocritical what's going on right now, and I think that the way this system has always worked, and the reason that 1.5 million men and women in uniform have given up their life is this is a great model that the rest of the world envies. My question is, why don't we go ahead and use the model the way it's structured, as opposed to altering it and then pointing a finger saying, well, they just wouldn't go along with us. And well, we were never involved. So these are big issues, but I think what the main thing is, I'll tell you where the biggest issue is, and you know where it is. Go to any place where there's what we used to call a filling station and stand there for a while and hear people when they look at you, $115 to fill my gas tank. Now I go to the grocery store. I can't afford what used to be cheap or affordable is no longer that way. This inflation is really, I think, the number one issue with almost every person I talk to is inflation. Are they concerned with pro-life? Absolutely. Are they concerned with Second Amendment rights? Absolutely. First Amendment rights, second, they're concerned with all of it. But right now, what looms in front of them all the time is like being on the Titanic and knowing that you're steaming towards an iceberg, and there's no reversal of the route that you're on. And it's just, I think it's absolutely incredible that the concerns is like, okay, we're going to talk about January the 6th. We're going to talk about gun rights. We're going to talk about the pro-life movement, but we're not going to talk about what every single American, whether they believe in Second Amendment rights or not, whether they're gun people or not, whether there are people that have any political bend, they know on this. And some of them don't even vote, but they know what they have to buy, and they look at this inflation, and people talk about 8.4% or 8.5%. That's not what it is. It's over 11% from January 21. Okay, just so we get that clear, because I love the way, the old saying is, figures don't lie, but liars can figure. I can dissect anything and make it look different than what it actually is. I mean, David Copperfield does it on the stage every night out in Las Vegas. So try to make people believe that what they're seeing, no, it's different than that. But it's the inflation that really is just driving most people.
So what's the solution to inflation? Is it, obviously everyone needs gas.
Energy. You can't look at any product or any service where the bottom line isn't energy, the cost of energy. We went from the leading energy country in the world to shutting down our own domestic supply. And I think the president right now is flying to places that really don't wish us to have good days and saying, would you please supplement, which we refuse to produce ourselves. And I know the president likes to talk about Putin. Putin had nothing to do with this. Now, has it exacerbated the problem? Absolutely. We got on that path on January the 20th, 2021. That's when we started with that. So the idea that somehow this just magically cropped up and that the real problem is that people in the energy business are looking to make profits. I mean, that's an easy thing to deflect. The only thing is, but sir, you didn't have to go outside this country for anything. I mean, if you look at I'm going to assume that you know exactly how small the percentages are that we get from Canada, that we get from Mexico, and especially from Russia. It's very small. But this is a global market, right? And we have the same thing with semiconductors. When you look at that, so where's the source? And if that source has been interrupted, what interrupted it? And was it something out of our control, or was it policy, wrong-headed policy? And if you say, well, it was wrong-headed policy, then I think for somebody to ask you, so what would you do about it? I said, it's pretty easy to go back. Just go back and look at the game films and see where we were. And if you again, you got to be careful the way you talk to people. I said, if you're aware of how that works, then you're aware of why we are where we are.
How much responsibility do oil companies have to drill on?
I just thank God that they actually go out and produce this stuff. And the confusion always comes down to people who are not familiar with the energy sector. Permits and actual wells are two different things. So we can talk about all the permits that are out there. I think it's not being truthful with the American people. We were energy independent, the biggest exporter of energy in the world. We were, with the emphasis on were. So do we want to blame the energy people for the soaring cost of energy? Say, what did we interrupt? We interrupted their supply chain. We interrupted their ability. Permitting is easy. The process to actually get that energy out of the ground is much more complicated. It takes years. So I think it's the same thing as a car dealer. I'd like to say, hey, we just had 200 kids that got permits to drive. That doesn't mean they're all going to buy a car, right? So I'm more of a practical side of this, and if you understand that part of it. The other thing I would just ask people when they say that, do you have any idea the tax revenues that these companies pay? Do you have any idea the fringe benefits that these people pay? You know, with every company, you don't have to be profitable to be subject to taxes. You got real estate taxes, you got wage taxes. A lot of these companies, I don't know that you have it here. One of the big things in my business is we want to supply benefits for the talent that we have. So how do you do that? Well, you have pension programs, you have health care. Who's picking the tab up on that? The same people that we're saying aren't doing their fair share. We tax them heavily. They provide employee benefits, and who does that take the burden off of? Our taxpayers. I mean, does the Newcastle News, I'm not applying for a job, do you guys supply health care?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you know how much that costs, right? Mm-hmm. What if we transfer it on to taxpayers? I mean, this one size fits all only works if you're running for office. It doesn't work in real world. So I'm pretty much a practical guy. I know where the revenue streams are, and I know when we interrupt them, we disrupt a whole plot. The whole model gets disrupted, and it's like, why did you do that?
I interviewed Senator Bob Casey yesterday, and he was talking about funding, the finances, all this and that, and he touted the idea, why don't we set a number for companies making these huge profits, set a number and have that tax, what he called that extra profit.
If I did that to you as a paper,
profit.
If I said, hey Mike, you guys made a lot more money than we thought, we're going to change the percentage of taxes that you pay, what would you say to me? You tell me, get out of here. You're in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Don't shove that stuff down my throat. Listen, it's a great idea for somebody who's never been in the private sector to make statements like that. You know, if you've never, listen, any of us can go to a Steeler game. There's nothing easier than watching the Steelers from a private box. Try working it on the field where you're 6 inches away from somebody needs to take off your head in order to make his house payment, his car payments, his kid payments, everything else. I think the senator has the ability to make those statements. I just think there's a disconnect in the way the real world works. And it's much easier to say, those who have it must pay more in order to offset those who don't. And we never look at programs, nothing sunsets. I mean, I'm sure here, I'm gonna take a wild guess at that. I'm gonna guess that the participation of the community, the people that buy this or advertising it, isn't the same model that it was years ago. So the people that can't afford the paper should pay more for it?
Yeah.
Well, no, seriously. I mean, that's the model. You know, that's what the model is. But who does that appeal to? Everybody who doesn't make a lot of money. Say, God damn it, yeah, these rich people aren't paying their fair share. You say, well, they pay most of the taxes now. Well, that's okay, but they need to pay more. They say, how much more? Well, just a lot more than they're paying. So there's never an exact formula. It's a great political statement to make. And I think that you and I would agree that in our years on earth, if people would talk more about policy and not the politics of it, you'd probably get a hell of a lot more done. But it's not about that. It's about saying something or doing something that would encourage a voter to look at that person saying, this person really has my interest. And I don't care who picks up the tab on it. I just think they need to pay more. We do stuff with Bob. I have no problem with Bob, but look at his resume. I mean, I don't think you're going to hire him to be your controller. Okay? That's not being mean, by the way. I got to tell you, I used to come over here on Friday nights when Lindy Laurel was there. We've dressed a lot of guys. Not everybody played. Yes, yeah.
Kind of getting to that.
Yeah.
I mean, we have some other stuff, but since you mentioned it, is there not enough talk about policy? Too much grade?
No. It's not about policy.
I mean, just
It's about Novembers. It's about Novembers. It's not about policy. It's not about policy. There's more policy that gets thrown in the trash heap because it doesn't fit the political narrative at the time. Most of the stuff, people put a moist finger, say, which way's the wind blowing, because that's the way I got to go too. You don't want to go against that because now all of a sudden say, yeah, but you know what? I don't want to alienate our voter base and say, but what if you were able to tell them the truth? Well, I may not get reelected, but I said that I didn't ask about whether your election would be successful. I said, what do you think would happen if you told them the truth? Do you think people then would say, I would rather have the truth than somebody tell me something pre-election that they know they can't do post-election, and then come back 2 years later or 4 years later or 6 years later and said, well, you just misunderstood what I said back then. The problem was these other people wouldn't go along with me. I mean, the big challenge, what did people always say about abortion? The left always said this: my personal preference would be. But the Supreme Court took that away from me. Well, now it's going to be out in the open. What is your personal preference, and what is it, more importantly, the people you represent? Because I don't represent me. I mean, we represent 750,000 people. So for me to go to Washington and say, no, it's got everything the way I've been thinking since the time I was a child, and after going through the Catholic school, and after going to Butler, and after going to Notre Dame, I know the answers to everything. And the only reason I ran for office is I just want to put my view out there. No, we represent a lot of people that have different views. And you try to balance it out and say, you know what, I think the majority of the people we represent, like when it comes to gun rights, the majority of people we represent in this area, what they don't like about it is people making it almost impossible for people to own guns anymore. And a lot of this red flag stuff, you can say, I don't think Mike Kelly should have guns. You say, why is that? He says, I just know him pretty well, and I think, he's probably a guy that shouldn't have a gun. Okay, fine. Pete's word's good enough.
kind of jumping off what you said, I mean, would term limits, like you were saying about... Yeah, well, I think on term limits, and I got to tell you, when I first started to run, the idea of term limits, because I had never been in politics before, really, I said, you know what, maybe we should have term limits. And then the question comes, so what you're saying is that after 2 terms or 4 terms or 3 terms or whatever it would be, that the Senate gets a 6-year term. And some people think the Senate should only be there for 2 terms, which would be 12 years. And they say, okay, then for the House, that's 6 terms. What I've come to understand is that term limits are really established, and it's the voters that determine your term. If they no longer think that you're representing their best interest, then they have the ability to register and vote their choice of who they'd like to have representing them. I don't want anybody to, I think that too often people go to either Harrisburg or Washington to give their view on things. We've always thought that our whole purpose is we're representatives, so we represent 750,000 people. I need to hear from them, and we have a very active, we're structured. We're in Erie, we're in Sharon, we're in Butler, so we made it possible that none of our constituents have to travel more than 45 minutes to get to our office. So it's it's not like we have one office up in Erie. I mean, people still tell me, oh, you're the guy from Erie. I said, well, I've been to Erie quite a few times, but I actually grew up in Butler. They go, whoa, wait a minute, where's Butler? I said, well, it's the southern part of the district. They said, really? I go, yeah, really. So, but we've tried to make sure that we have a presence in each of those areas and try to be very accessible to people. For the last couple of years, we did the work of the IRS and Social Security. They were still at home. In fact, they're still at home. They haven't gone back to work. Could you imagine if you came in here and all your people just stayed at home? You say, wait, I got to get a paper out today. What do you get? What the hell are you talking about? I say, well, I'm not ready to go back.
Turning to a different subject,
Sure.
There was an accusation leveled against you in your office about, scamming the vote, select the votes.
Do you know what that is?
Start at the beginning.
Well, no,
in
no,
your
no,
view,
no, no.
what happened?
No, Mike. I want you to tell me what you think the accusation is.
I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
Neither do I. Neither do I.
So there's no truth. You know nothing about this.
Well, wait a minute now. You're asking me there's no truth. So I asked you, what do you know about it? And you said you don't really know that much about it. And I said, I don't know either. I have no idea. Ron Johnson, I met at a GOP winter convention back in 2011 or 12. And the reason I talked to him, we were sitting at the same table and I looked at his business card. I said, that is an interesting business card. He said, well, I had my own business and this is what we used to do. I said, interesting. That's it. Now we're in 2022 and people ask me, well, what about this? And I said, tell me what it is that's the subject. And they'll go, no, you need to tell me. I said, no, I'm not playing that game. I'm not playing the game. I have too many people ask me questions about something they have absolutely no depth of knowledge on, and then write an opinion on it or go and broadcast an opinion on it and say, well, this is what he was accused of. And I'll say, what was it that he was accused of? Well, he was just accused of, well, I don't know what he was accused of, but I'd like to get his opinion on what he was accused of. I have no idea of that. I have never had a conversation with Senator Johnson. I think that there's been several variations of what the senator said, and I've had people tell me that, but I've had no conversation with them at all.
So you didn't have anything involved with somehow trying
No,
to
I'm going to say
flip
it again.
the votes?
I'm going to say again. I've had no conversation with him. I have, and so you're saying to flip the votes, but you don't know what I'm being accused of. I'm not trying to be a smart ass with you, but you're saying to me, no, so you're saying you had no, I'm going to say to you, so Mike, what is it I'm being accused of? And you said, well, something that happened back in January of 2021. I'm saying, what? My answer to that would be, so you're saying that somehow one of Pennsylvania's, what do we have, 16, 15 reps right now, actually had some kind of a conversation with somebody from Wisconsin. Why? I had, we already had the Act 77. That was ours. Do you know that? Mm-hmm. This is not a gotcha thing, by the way, because most of you never reported it. All right? I'm not attacking you, but there was a very serious problem with the way we voted in 2020. We have, in this state, an election process. You can change that process, but it's called an amendment to our Constitution. It was never done. My objection to the election back then was we went outside our Constitution to change our election process. That was my whole question, was about changing an unconstitutional change in our voting. Now, anything else after that is all the drama, I guess, that we're watching right now. By the way, I haven't watched any of this stuff on TV. I'm more concerned about what people have to spend for gasoline and for ground chuck and what it costs them for clothes and everything else. I think it's all a distraction. Well, come on. I mean, if I don't want you to see something, right? I'll try to look at something else. No, look over here. Don't look at this. Look over here. That's the whole way. Like I said about David Copperfield, the whole idea is to distract you. There's no magic to it. It's just a distraction. So, but on this thing that you're asking me about, I would just ask you all to please look into what it is that supposedly happened, because I don't know. Nobody's ever explained it to me, by the way.
Kind of speaking broadly about the hearings.
Yeah, I'm not watching them.
At this point,
I'm not watching them.
does the country, the GOP, what have you, should 2020 be in the past?
Yeah, well, the
Well,
other
as
party,
far
the other
as-
party is never going to let it be in the past. They have run this country into the ground, and the only thing they can do is again distract you. No, the issue with them is what happened on January the 6th of 2021. They won't talk about gas prices. They won't talk about food prices. They won't talk about us shutting down our own energy sources. That's not on the table. And it's not on the table for an exact reason. They don't want to talk about it. So how many investigations do you have to have? And how long do you want to draw it out? And just look at the structure of the panel.
Even on that point,
Yeah.
I mean, the president's kind of campaigning if he's not, I don't know if that's...
Which president?
Trump.
Oh, okay, all right. You know, Democrats don't like to say that. I don't know if you're a
Former
Democrat, but
President
please
Trump, I
don't.
don't know
No, he's just
the
Trump.
vernacular on there, but
We don't talk about him anymore.
is that too much of a distraction now? It's 2022, there's an election.
Ask the Democrats.
in 2
Ask the
years.
Democrats what they think. I mean, I think that so the finals. Well, I didn't agree with the election of 2020 then, and because I for reasons I already stated. That's, you know how long ago that is now.
It's 2 years.
Don't you wonder why is that still front page news? Shouldn't you be talking about your policy? Shouldn't you be talking about the things you're doing for the American people that make their lives a little bit easier and a little more understandable? Shouldn't we be talking about what happened to us as a global figure when it comes to having our own national defense? Has everybody forgot about Afghanistan? I mean, you know, so anything you can do to take people's eyes off of how poorly managed we've been that's what they love. That's what they love. One of them will not talk to you about Afghanistan. They won't talk to you about our energy situation. None of that stuff is on the table. You're not allowed to talk about that. What they want to talk about is the fact that, you know, we got to get this January 6th thing straightened out first. And then look at the structure of the panel. If you can look at the structure of the panel and think that, okay, this is a very fair assembly of representatives to actually get to the bottom of whatever it is that we need to get to the bottom of. I'd rather get to the bottom of how long is a country that is so blessed with more energy than anybody else in the world, how long are we going to be dependent on bad actors, people who wish us harm? How long are we going to fund them? How long are we going to watch our people struggle to put food on their table or fuel in their tank? How long are we going to do that? How the simple things that we need to live our lives, are we going to ever talk about that? And the answer is no. No, we've got to get this settled first. And say, so when would you be done questioning us in this? Probably after the next election, depending on the results.
For those reasons you laid out, is that why you would or wouldn't predict a red wave in November?
No, I've never predicted anything. And the people that tell me it's going to be a red wave, I said, you really think so? They said, yeah. I said, then you watch the Super Bowl. And they'll say, well, wait, that's different. I said, no. Cincinnati was icing down champagne while the Rams were going 80 plus yards in a little over 2 minutes to beat them. I think you better concentrate in the game that's on the field right now. You can look at game films after. You can do the trophy presentation afterwards, but you better be paying attention to what's going on. I will tell you right now, because I know you guys are the same. You know, we grew up, you know what we are really driven by? More than anything else, it's not winning. It's losing. We hate to lose. We absolutely detest it. We can't stand it. We won't accept it. And look, thank God we were raised by the generation that we were raised with. Their whole purpose in life was not to lose the greatest country in the world. Their concentration was not on winning. It was about not losing. I guarantee you, if somebody played for Lindy Lauro, he didn't talk a bit about winning. He talked about, don't you dare lose to this team tonight. I don't care if that damn Butler comes over here, you're going to kick their ass for 4 quarters and you're going to send them home bruised. My coach was the same way. I mean, we looked forward to playing each other so that we wouldn't lose. We couldn't go through a whole year with this thing hanging over our shoulders that we lost to Newcastle. I'm telling you, it's the hatred of losing. It's the ability to say, I am not going to lose. I am not going to lose the greatest nation the world's ever known over some stupid political battle and not about solid policy that puts us in the position we need to be in. And I think that's the saddest part for all this for me. I have watched this take place. I said, my God, we are willing to surrender everything that we've become by the greatest generation that ever lived, that sacrificed everything for us. I mean, we have lost market share. I mean, take a look. That the greatest producer of almost everything in the world has now lost market share to almost everybody in the world.
I think when you say winning and losing, sometimes do you think if that's what we focus on, then it's the people down the line who lose because of, if all we care about is winning.
I think it's just the opposite. I know that whenever we're able to
There's too much of focus on
winning,
instead of
winning at all costs is not, and that's not the way we play the game, right? There's a reason there's rules in place. There's oversight in place. It's when you go outside those boundaries and say, you know what, I don't care what it takes. I'll cheat to win. Then everything's gone. It's just gone. That's not who we are.
We'll have time for a couple more questions before we have to wrap up.
Sure. I'm absolutely taking advantage of double dipping because you're here. A year ago, automotive dealers were
Yes.
saying, what the hell's going on?
Yes.
Now they're saying, what in the blankety blank 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 hell is going on?
Yeah.
You're in the business.
I am.
What's going on? That you can't get automobiles, you're having a hard time getting parts. You're ending right now. Traditionally, this is the end of the
Model year. Yes.
But there's still backlog.
Right.
What are auto manufacturers and suppliers telling you? What is going
Well,
on?
I know, but Mike, you know what the problem is. We don't have domestic supply lines. We decided to go cheap and not consistent. I mean, if we think that, if we let them do it in Taiwan, it'll be cheaper. If we let them do it in Mexico, it'll be cheaper. We like cheap flip-flops and cheap t-shirts and cheap products. And then we forget, but when you do that, then you lose market share. So if you lose market share, what do you lose? Domestic production. If you lose domestic production, what do you use? What do you lose? Domestic producers, we're talking about jobs. Jobs. It's all market share. You've got the same problem in this business, by the way. I'm not being a smart ass with you, okay? Listen, do you know that when my dad and mom went into business in 1953 with a little one-car showroom in a town called Verona. I will tell you that in the 60s and early 70s, 1 out of 3 new trucks that were sold in America was a Chevrolet truck. That didn't include GMC, which is the same truck, different horn ring, different grill. 1 out of 3. 1 out of 4 new cars sold then was a Chevrolet. But remember, after Chevrolet, you got a raise, buy a Pontiac. You got another raise, buy an Oldsmobile. You get another raise, get a Buick. Man, when you hit a home run, buy a Cadillac. At that time, General Motors controlled probably somewhere between 53 and 54% of the total market, right? 25% of what we call price class, which was cars, and 30% of weight class, which was trucks. Look at it today and try to figure out who it is that's winning and who's losing. When we decided to go overseas, and I'm a very big critic when it comes to subsidizing people to buy an electric car. If you want to subsidize somebody, subsidize that guy who's working 2 jobs and driving a used car so he can get to work, so he can feed his family. We don't need to subsidize people who can buy $100 and some thousand car or truck. Why? Why would you subsidize them? We talk about the government picking winners and losers. Who made that? Who would give somebody $7,500 who's buying that vehicle and say, you need this extra $75, right? And the guy goes, no, but I'll take it, thank you. It is so upside down, and my concern right now is our models, the plans are being disrupted. The whole premise of why it is we do certain things is now being disrupted by the government picking winners and losers. And I think it's a shame. And the other thing is we rely way too much on foreign producers to produce different parts for us.
I know Mike has another one, but how do you incentivize American companies to produce here? It might not make you as much money as it would going overseas.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I will, my personal opinion, look who's on their boards. Dealers don't make that decision of who's going to produce the car. Boards do. What do they base a lot of their decisions on? Profits. Where do the profits come from? They don't care as long as they're profitable because they're judged on profit. What if you say, well, my God, I go by Lordstown, it's shut down. I remember when they made full-size Chevy cars there. I remember when they made Chevy vans there. I remember when they made Chevy Cavaliers there. I remember saying, and what do they make there now? Nothing. Those are a lot of jobs. Why did we allow ourselves to lose that market? Because we went for cheap instead of for something that makes sense. Americans will always do the same thing. They look at it and say, well, I could save a little bit of money. That's why I went there. I said, but by doing that, you've changed a market that we no longer have the production that we need. And a lot of that, if you looked at why we won previous wars, not because we were tougher, smarter, or anything else, because we outproduced other places. And they didn't have access to us because we were buffeted by two oceans that made it impossible for people to get. It's no longer that way. I just think, I look at all the people that used to be in business here. I mean,
I think you just described the newspaper industry.
Yeah, but you know what? There's a lot of what we're doing today. I think it's short-sighted. I mean, I just don't understand how we can be so short-sighted. But I got to tell you, I've sat on dealer councils. The least important voice was that of the dealers, right? So in Newcastle, who's the Chevy dealer right now?
Chevy. Oh, we have one.
It's just changed. Well, it's just changed, but I could go back to who was there and where were they and what it was. So you go to any Little League game, whose fence names did you see on the fences? Go to a high school play, whose name's in the high school play? I mean, we as an industry have marginalized ourselves in our importance. I want the stuff built here because I think we build it better. We may not build it cheaper, but I'd rather go long-term, say, I want everybody who's raising a family, who's supporting a community, a church, a school, I want them to have jobs, good jobs. I don't want to be a government subsidy that you can't count on. I mean, I still people ask, are we going to get another check? I said, you better hope to hell you don't, because you're going to get taxed for it down the road. That's not government money, that's your money.
One quick question.
Yeah.
Sure.
Supreme
Probably
Court.
to make it the last, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, last.
Yeah.
The third Supreme Court ruling
Yes.
in Maine about the state, funding, a religious school. This district has a lot of religious schools, not as near many as there used to be.
Yeah.
What's your opinion of that ruling? Are you looking to do anything within Congress to enhance that, neutralize that?
No, right now, I'm just so much more concerned right now with the major issues facing everybody we talk to, and that's inflation. Listen, these other things, I'm not saying they're not important. I'm just saying everybody in their life looks at the problems that they have, and at some point you have to prioritize what it is that you're facing today. What is your greatest priority today? These other things are very important. They have to be addressed, but I think for today, now, depend who you talk to. If you talk to, faith-based people, that's their issue. If somebody were to ask me, what do you think the biggest issue is in your district? I'm gonna say it's pro-life. Until gasoline went off the charts, until food went off the charts. Now people are they're very concerned about the pro-life issue. But if you were to ask them, number one concern, Mike, if I were to ask you, what bothers you more than anything in your life right now? And you're going to say, what? The costs of everything. I can't keep up with the inflation. So the Supreme Court's going to weigh in and weigh out, and different states are going to have a voice to say it. But I just think that the beauty of this thing last week was the fact that the courts decided it should be returned to the states because the states have the jurisdiction and the responsibility. I think the saddest part was back in 1973, the states walked away from their responsibility, their authority, and they said, no, we don't want to make that decision. let's give it to these 9 people in the Supreme Court, let them make the decision. I just think you get elected to an office. It's like when we get married, you get married for better or worse, right? Well, I mean, seriously, I don't know that you, it'd be easy. You want to have a happy marriage, you opt out of every single serious issue you have in your marriage. That usually ends up in a divorce, but I think that's where the people are right now. They don't believe that it's, that the justice system is working.
And one little favor, this will only take you 30 seconds.
It's hard for you to do something in 30 seconds.
That's when you can't. I took some photos and I don't know if either of our papers are gonna use it, like to get him walking in front of the Newcastle News with the Newcastle News sign.
Oh, absolutely not.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
No, get me coming out of the crane room, something like that. Don't do that stuff. I'm very comfortable in Newcastle, and I think some of the best days I had was even after both the coaches I have such great respect for retired, was spending time with both of them. So Lindy's daughter had a restaurant in town here.
Up the street now.
Yeah, well, wherever it is, and then I remember going out to the crane room out near past Chuck Tanner's. I used to go to the Chuck Tanner's with a guy named Eddie Vargo, who was in charge of the National League umpires. He and Chuck Tanner were good friends. Just go over and sit and listen to these guys talk. And I said, oh, God, I wish I had recorded this stuff. Those were really great days by the greatest generation, and I just think that we have a much more intense responsibility than we're facing right now. I think we always want somebody else to make the decision. Say, oh my gosh, 1.5 million people gave their lives for you to be able to make that decision without the heavy hand of the government. It's amazing to me of how government keeps wanting to grow bigger and bigger and bigger and more invasive. You see it in your business, I know you do. You've been in it long enough to say, holy smokes, I didn't know I was gonna get censored on this stuff.
Do you have any signage in the lobby, or would you want to shoot something out by the
Anything
side?
you want to